All right, for all you fear porn addicts, here's another one. I'm scrolling through my Evernote and just picking off stories for a theme for the day. And this one is why America is heading straight toward the worst debt crisis in history. And this is from authored by Michael Snyder via the Economic Collapse blog. Today, America is nearly $70 trillion in debt, and that debt is shooting higher at an exponential rate. Usually, most of the focus is on the national debt, which is now $21 trillion and rising. When you total all forms of debt in our society together, it comes to a grand total just short of $70 trillion. Many people seem to believe that the debt imbalances that existed prior to the great financial crisis of 2008 have been solved, but that is not the case at all. We are living in the terminal phase of the greatest debt bubble in history, and with each passing day, the mountain of debt just keeps on getting bigger and bigger. It is simply not mathematically possible for debt to keep growing at a pace that is many times greater than the GDP growth. And at some point, this absurd bubble will come to an abrupt end. So those that are forecasting many years of prosperity to come are simply being delusional. Our current standard of living is very heavily fueled by debt, and at some point we're going to hit a wall. Let's talk about consumer debt first. Excluding mortgage debt, consumer debt is projected to hit the $4 trillion mark by the end of the year. Americans are in a borrowing mood, and their total tab for consumer debt could reach a record $4 trillion by the end of 2018. That's according to LendingTree, a loan comparison website which analyzes data from the Federal Reserve on non-mortgage debts, including credit cards and auto, personal, and student loans. Americans owe more than 26% of their annual income to this debt. That's up from 22% in 2010. It's also higher than debt levels during the mid-2000s when credit availability soared. We never have seen this level of consumer debt before in all of U.S. history. Just a few days ago, I wrote about how tens of millions of Americans are living on the edge financially. And this is yet more evidence to back up that claim. Right now, Americans owe more than $1 trillion on auto loans. And we're clearly in the greatest auto loan debt bubble that we have ever seen. Americans also owe more than $1 trillion on credit cards, and credit card delinquency rates are rising. In fact, in some ways, we witnessed during the first quarter of 2018 was quite reminiscent of the peak of the last financial crisis. In the first quarter, the delinquency rate on credit card loan balances at commercial banks other than the largest 100, so at the 4,788 smaller banks in the U.S., spiked to 5.9%. This exceeds the peak during the financial crisis. The credit card charge-off rate at these banks spiked to 8%. This is approaching the peak during the financial crisis. I kind of remember that because I was talking to a friend of mine at work at the time, and they were actually basically charging off a lot of folks that had, even though they were even paid up, even though they were current on their credit card debt, because it was so high, they were just canceling people's credit cards and basically charging them off and sending them into bankruptcy because the debt load that the banks had was so great. The student loan debt bubble has also surpassed $1 trillion, and the average young adult with student loan debt has a negative net worth. Despite economic stock market gains over the past 9 years, many young adults are still struggling to get ahead in their financial lives, and in some ways, things might have actually gotten worse. Americans aged 25 to 34, these are all millennials, with college degrees and student debt have a median net worth of negative $1,900, according to a report analyzing 2016 Federal Reserve data just released Thursday by Young Invincibles, a young adult advocacy group. That's a drop of $9,000 from 2013, Wise analysis found. Meanwhile, corporate debt has doubled since the last financial crisis. Thousands of companies are so heavily leveraged that even a slight economic downturn could completely wipe them out. That's probably why Donald Trump is actually passing this $1 trillion tax break to actually, so they can actually buy back some of this debt. State and local governments' debt levels are also at record highs, but nobody seems to care. And if we never have another recession, everything might work out okay. The biggest offender of all, of course, is the United States federal government. We have been adding about $1 trillion a year to the national debt since Barack Obama first entered the White House, and Goldman Sachs is projecting that number will surpass $2 trillion by 2028. The fiscal outlook for the United States is not good, according to Goldman Sachs, and could pose a threat to the country's economic security during the next recession. According to forecasts from the bank's chief economist, the federal deficit will increase from $825 billion, or 4.1% of gross domestic product, to $1.25 trillion, 5.5% of GDP by 2021. And by 2028, the bank expects the number to balloon to $2.05 trillion, 7% of GDP. Our national debt has been growing at an exponential rate for decades, and because total disaster has not struck, yet many people seem to believe that we can keep on doing this. But the truth is that it simply is not possible. There is only so much debt that a society can take on before the entire system implodes. So how close are we to that point? The following chart comes from Charles Hugh Smith, and it shows an exponential rise in overall debt levels that has taken us to the brink of nearly $70 trillion in debt. And this is Fred, the Federal Reserve. Jesus Christ. Wow. Look at that chart. Look at that freaking chart. And this is much worse than it was in 2008. And this chart from Sirocco report shows that how our rate of overall debt growth has compared to the rate of GDP growth. This is a joke. This is a joke. We are literally on a path to national suicide. Whether it happens next month, next year, or 5 years from now, it is inevitable. We're going to slam into a brick wall of financial reality. For the moment, the only way we can continue to enjoy our current debt-fueled standard of living is to continue increasing our debt bubble at an exponential rate. But that can only go on for so long. And when the party ends, we're going to experience the greatest debt crisis in history. Today, the average American household is nearly $140,000 in debt, and that is more than double the median household income. If we were to include each household share of corporate debt, local government debt, state government debt, and federal government debt, that number will be many times higher. All of this debt will never be repaid. Ultimately, there will become a day when the system will completely collapse under the weight of so much debt. And most Americans are completely unaware that such a day of reckoning is rapidly approaching. Can you say the universal basic income and a debt jubilee? I remember when I first talked about the UBI and universal basic income and say that was the only way out. Man, I got clowned for 2 years. I mean, really clowned for 2 years. I'm not getting clowned anymore. Instead of being called a clown, I'm called a fearmonger. Why? Because now everybody can see it. And now everybody's addicted to it because you can't look away. It's like a bad car accident on the highway. I don't care how bad it is. You have to rubberneck. Everybody's got to look. So when people come to my channel, they might not like it, but they have to look. And I've been saying this stuff for 10 years, man. This stuff can't be paid. There's no way out of this stuff. There really isn't. They can't pay this back. There was one chance they had to pay this, to actually get this stuff corrected back in 2009 when the G20 came together and actually said, we're going to unstack all this debt, unstack all this paper, all at the same time, and bring prices and debt down at once. But people cheat. Nobody wants to lose. Nobody wants to do the right thing for the whole group. There's too much selfishness, especially at the top. So instead of making it better, one person starts to cheat, like such as Goldman Sachs, and the next person says, I don't want to fall behind. I don't want to be excluded, and so on and so forth until you get to the point where we are where we have now, where instead of stepping on the brake, we just stepped on the accelerator. And trust and believe your orange man in chief is not the courageous type. He doesn't have a soul like Barack Obama. Barack Obama at least had a kind heart where he wouldn't do certain things. The guy you have in office doesn't have that kind of heart because he doesn't give a shit. You're not human to him anyway. You might as well have Lex Luthor in office as compared to Donald Trump. You might even have the Joker. Okay, sometimes I think Heath Ledger is just reincarnated into Donald Trump. But it is what it is, and I think that's all the fear porn I have for today. I'm not going to dig up anymore. Since it's past hump day and it's getting close to the weekend, I might as well dump it on you Thursday instead of Friday, so you can actually go out and enjoy your weekend. So you had such a great weekend, so this is actually bringing people back into reality. But anyway, that's all I got for this one. This is BGS out, and I'll see you guys on the next one.